Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. U.S. Democrat candidate Joe Biden says he is going to win the presidency with more than 300 electoral votes. Speaking to supporters in Delaware, Biden says he has got over 74 million votes. The Democratic candidate has taken the lead in Pennsylvania with 99% of the votes counted. Biden is also leading in Nevada and Arizona, while a recount will be held in Georgia. Meanwhile, Trump remained defiant, vowing to press unfounded claims of fraud. The Afghan government says the Taliban Helmand governor has been injured in an airstrike. The defense ministry says the head of the Taliban's intelligence for Nadali district and 9 fighters were also killed. The Taliban have yet to comment on the claim. Azerbaijan and its forces have liberated 16 more villages in the Upper Karabakh region from Armenia's occupation. Earlier, the Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces once again targeted civilian areas. Nearly 1,200 troops have been killed since the clashes over Nagorno-Karabakh broke out in September. France has registered a record over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with tally crossing 1.6 million. In India, 577 people have died and over 50,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has registered over 1,500 new cases and 20 deaths overnight, as the toll stands at 6,943. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.24 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. For news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. U.S. Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden says he is certain to win the race for the White House as his lead over President Trump widens. With the count in its final stages, Biden inches closer to the 270 electoral votes mark needed to lead the country. Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden has once again urged Americans to remain patient and calm as ballot counting continues in a handful of states that hold the key to the White House. Speaking to supporters in Delaware, Biden said that the numbers told a clear and convincing story, and he is going to win the presidency. Biden gained lead over Trump in the battleground states of Pennsylvania and Georgia, as he already enjoyed a lead in Arizona and Nevada. Vote counts so far show Biden leading Trump by 4.1 million votes nationwide out of a record 147 million. As Biden inched closer to the win, hundreds of Democrats gathered in cities across the United States, dancing in celebration.
Just look at what has happened since yesterday. 24 hours. We were behind in Georgia. Now we're ahead, and we're going to win that state. 24 hours ago, we were behind in Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania. And now we're ahead, but we're winning in Arizona. We're in Nevada, and in fact, our lead just doubled in Nevada. We're on track to over 300 electoral college votes.
Meanwhile, in a tweet, Republican President Donald Trump warned that Biden should not wrongfully claim the presidency. Trump vows to press unfounded claims of fraud as Republicans sought to raise $60 million to fund lawsuits challenging the results. Dozens of Donald Trump supporters demonstrated outside the election centers in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, calling for count of legal votes.
I'm here because I don't believe Georgia is a blue state. I believe we are a red state. I think there's more afoot here than just normal legal ballots. So I find my freedom and my freedom of choice important to me.
Well, I'm upset about these votes. I know there's a bunch of voter fraud going on, and I think people need to step up, and I think it needs to be a fair election.
Some in Trump's camp define the legal efforts as disorganized. The close election has underscored the nation's deep political divides, and upon winning, Biden will have to govern a deeply polarized Washington. Iran and Cuba have pledged to reinforce mutual alliance against sanctions imposed by the United States. This comes as Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif met with his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez in Havana. In the meeting, Zarif said Tehran and Havana have stood together in the face of pressure from Washington. He added that the pressure can only be considered as economic and medical terrorism, which targets the Iranians and Cubans. Zarif said mutual cooperation in the areas of energy, science, and technology will not be affected by the United States curbs. For his part, Rodriguez said Cuba reiterates its condemnation of unilateral and coercive U.S. measures against Iran. He said Iranian people are entitled to peacefully use nuclear energy. The Iranian foreign minister is on an official visit to Latin America and also visited Venezuela. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he wants to have a better tie with Washington after the U.S. presidential election. The president expressed concern over the uncertainty of the election results in the U.S. Maduro said Americans no longer want imperialist wars and threats.
We want to have the best relations of dialogue and cooperation with the United States, no matter who wins. Someday they will understand, someday they will. It's just a matter of time. A new consciousness is rising in humanity. A new consciousness is rising in the United States of America, in its youth, in its people. They no longer want imperialist wars. They no longer want threats and looting.
Over the last few years, the Trump administration imposed aggressive sanctions on the South American country. Hong Kong's chief executive says whoever wins the U.S. presidential elections should end interference in China's internal affairs. Addressing media in Beijing, Carrie Lam expressed hope the U.S. approach to Hong Kong will improve. Lam said every country and government should respect the jurisdiction of another country.
To whatever administration in the United States of today, I would like to make this appeal that every country, every government should respect the jurisdiction of another country and another territory. For the past year or so, the American administration and officials have been repeatedly interfering with internal affairs of the People's Republic of China and the internal affairs of Hong Kong. That is totally unreasonable and could not be justified in international relationships.
The United States had sanctioned Hong Kong officials, including Lam, on adopting a law safeguarding national security. Over in Afghanistan, the government says the Taliban's Helmand governor has been injured in an airstrike. The defense ministry says the head of the Taliban's intelligence for the Nadali district and 9 fighters were also killed. The ministry said 25 Taliban fighters were killed and several others wounded during counterattacks in the Uruzgan and Zabul province. It said 2 strongholds of the Taliban and large amounts of their weapons and ammunition were destroyed. The Taliban have yet to comment on the claim. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register protest over New Delhi's propaganda against the Kartarpur corridor. In a statement, the Foreign Office said India is trying to malign the peace corridor and create religious disharmony in Pakistan. It said the Sikh community has also snubbed India's unwarranted objections to the managerial affairs of the corridor. The statement read, Sikh people from all over the world have lauded Pakistan's efforts to complete the Kartarpur corridor. The Foreign Office told India to take steps to protect its own minorities instead of maligning Pakistan. Beijing's Ambassador Nong Rong says China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will change the destiny of Pakistan. He held a meeting with CPEC Authority Chairman Asim Salim Bajwa in Islamabad. Nong said the economic corridor is a flagship project between the two brotherly countries. He said China seeks to expand cooperation in 10 industrial parks along with agriculture and social sectors. For his part, Bajwa said the authority is committed to providing a one-step window service for all transit projects. He also hoped that friendship between the two countries will further strengthen in the future. Azerbaijan says its forces have liberated 16 more villages in the Upper Karabakh region from Armenia's occupation. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said that the villages were liberated in the Fuzuli, Jabrail, Zenglian, Golbaldi, Khojali, and Khojavend. President Ilham Aliyev announced the liberation of these areas on Twitter. Earlier, the Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces once again targeted civilian areas. In a statement, the ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. The ministry stated Armenia's 178th Reconnaissance Battalion have lost half of its military personnel. It added the military personnel of Armenia's Special Forces unit were also surrounded and destroyed. Nearly 1,200 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. Hezbollah has condemned the U.S. sanctions on the president of Free Patriotic Movement Party in Lebanon. In a statement, Hezbollah said the sanctions are political and undisguised interference in the internal affairs of Lebanon. It said the United States has no right to preach on fighting terrorism as it sponsors terrorism, corruption, and dictatorships across the globe. This came after U.S. Treasury Department blacklisted son-in-law of Lebanon's President Michel Oun Gibran Bassil. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin said systematic corruption in Lebanon's political system was exemplified by Bassil. Responding, Bassil said he doesn't fear the Kurds and will never turn against the Lebanese people. In Iraq, police have killed a protester in the southern city of Basra. Medics say around 40 others were wounded as security forces opened fire during clashes with hundreds of protesters. Local officials say protesters took to the streets demanding jobs and basic services. The clashes broke out after some of the protesters tried to set up tents in a public square. Iraq's Interior Ministry has confirmed the death of a 29-year-old man identified as an unemployed Iraqi, Omar al-Thahabi. In a statement, the ministry said it is investigating the incident as security forces are not allowed to use weapons against the demonstrators. More than 500 people have been killed since the anti-government protest movement began in October 2019. A Palestinian held in Israel has agreed to end his 103-day hunger strike against his detention without charges. Israeli authorities arrested Mahar al-Kharas in July under administrative detention policy. Al-Kharas' wife said Israeli authorities assured him his open-ended detention will not be extended beyond the end of November. In an interview, she said her husband lost 95 pounds of weight and is undergoing a medical checkup. Meanwhile, a Palestinian prisoner, Abdul Rauf Qidan, has also been freed by Israelis after 16 years. In another event, Israeli occupational forces injured 3 Palestinian protesters in Kfar Qadam's village. The local official said Israeli soldiers targeted peaceful protesters with rubber-coated rounds and tear gas. Kfar Qadam's villagers have been protesting every Friday since 2002 against the illegal Israeli settlements. Ethiopia says its air force has bombed arms depot and destroyed military hardware in the opposition-held northern Tigray region. In a televised address, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the strikes hit important sites of rivals in the regional capital, Mekelle. Abiy said he will disarm the fugitives belonging to the Tigray People's Liberation Front with justice. He said the operations seek to safeguard the rights of Ethiopians to lead a peaceful life and to restore the rule of law. Prime Minister's office has accused Tigray People's Liberation Front of using the civilian population as human shields in the operation. Earlier, Ethiopia announced launching the military operations against Tigray following a deadly attack on an army base. In Nigeria, protests against police brutality have intensified as security forces fired tear gas to disperse the crowds. Local media said police also used gunshots on the protesters in the capital, Abuja. Led by former presidential candidate Omoliev Swore, the demonstrators gathered outside the National Assembly complex. Mass protesters began earlier this month against killings and mistreatment by police special anti-robbery squad. Despite disbanding the police unit, demonstrations have continued in Lagos and other parts of the country. Last month, President Muhammadu Buhari called on the youth to end their protest across the country. The second phase of Egypt's general elections has started across 13 governorates. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has also cast his vote in Hierapolis. Around 31 million Egyptians are eligible to cast their ballots over the 2 days. Some 2,000 candidates are competing for 70 individual seats, while 284 candidates are competing under the list system in 2 districts. Egypt's National Election Authority will announce the results of this phase on the 15th of November. Earlier, a pro-government party, won a sweeping majority of votes in the first phase. The International Civil Aviation Organization has asked Iran to speed up the probe in a drowning of a Ukrainian airliner in January. The UN agency said it had several exchanges with the Iranian authorities to investigate the incident in accordance with its provisions. Responding, Iran's air chairman Farhad Parvez said Tehran has responsibly reported to the organization on the process. He said Iran is obeying international rules and will send the final draft to the report to participating nations soon. The Ukraine Airlines flight was shot down by Iranian ground-to-air missile, killing 176 people. The United Nations called for a holding credible elections in Myanmar to help advance human rights and democratic reforms. Secretary General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson hoped they will help pave the way for the return of the refugees. Stephanie Dujarric urged a ceasefire across the country to allow everyone to focus on combating the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the spokesman said all parties to the armed conflict must respect their obligations under international law. He said Guterres will follow the general elections in Myanmar on the 8th of November. Meanwhile, civil society groups say dozens of networks on Facebook are spreading falsehood they could fear lead to strife. They're also worried it may undermine the upcoming polls in the country. France has registered record over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with tally crossing 1.6 million. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.24 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. The coronavirus continues thrashing relentlessly as the world reports hundreds of thousands of daily cases. The European continent has emerged to be the epicenter of the virus in the second wave. The region now accounts for more than 12 million cases and over 300,000 deaths. The United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Spain, Greece, Norway, Denmark, and many others have shut down daily lives considerably to cope with the virus's spread. In France, the virus has exhausted the healthcare system as authorities say the younger population is equally being attacked by the virus.
At the beginning of the second wave, it was more vulnerable people and more elderly people coming to the hospital. But for several weeks now, that's no longer the case. The average age of patients in the unit has lowered. We have people aged 40 or 30 who even had to be intubated and ventilated.
Over in Asia, the outbreak in India continues to overwhelm the authorities. 577 people have died in the country and over 50,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned a unique mutation of the virus in Minsk has the potential of a global spill of a new strain.
We are working with our regional offices in Europe, in Wipro, and in the Western Pacific and in the Americas, where there are mink farms, because there are many mink farms all over the globe, and looking at the biosecurity on the mink farms, looking at the surveillance that's happening in these mink farms, and to support countries in taking the right steps to prevent the virus to continue to circulate in minks and to prevent spillover events from happening.
In the United States, infection tally has exceeded 9.7 million, with over 236,000 deaths. The White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has also tested positive for the virus. In Latin America, the virus continues to remain the most fatal in Brazil. The country has reported nearly 300 deaths and over 18,000 cases in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has reported 20 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The health ministry said the country's death toll has risen to nearly 7,000. The ministry said 1,502 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. It added that the number of active cases in the country is nearly 17,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 890 patients remain critical. Pakistan's Goodwill ambassador Vanessa O'Brien has held a meeting with the Chief of Army Staff, Qamar Javed Bajwa. American-British mountaineer O'Brien holds the Guinness World Record for being the only woman to reach the Earth's highest and lowest points. In a tweet, military media wing ISPR said Bajwa appreciated O'Brien on her achievements. It added the Chief of Army Staff also thanked her for promoting Pakistan as a Goodwill ambassador. O'Brien carried the Pakistani flag to the world's second highest mountain, K2, and the world's deepest point, the Challenger Deep. Earlier, she presented that very flag to Pakistan's President, Dr. Arif Alvi. In a tweet, the President's office said O'Brien met President Alvi at the Avani Sadr. The European Union has imposed sanctions on 8 ministers newly appointed by Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. In a statement, the bloc accused the officials of violent repressions of Syrian civilian population. It said the curbs include ban on traveling, freezing of assets, ban on the import of oil, and export of technological equipment. The bloc added the total number of sanctioned persons has risen to 288. The EU said 70 entities are also subject to an asset freeze. It said Brussels is committed to finding a lasting and credible political solution to the Syrian conflict on the basis of a UN resolution. The European Union has imposed sanctions on Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and his son Viktor Lukashenko. In a statement, the bloc said 15 people are blacklisted in relation to the violent repression and intimidation of peaceful protesters. The sanction list also includes police chief of the Russian intelligence agency and Lukashenko's chief of staff. This brings the total number of Belarusians sanctioned by the European Union to 59. The sanctions freeze their assets in European states and prevent them from obtaining visas to enter the bloc. The EU rejects Lukashenko's controversial re-election on the 9th of August. Belarusian president denies all allegations. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his country is very well prepared to move on without the post-Brexit trade deal. But Johnson added he believes a deal can be done if the European Union wants to do it. The Prime Minister said it all depends on the partners across the Channel. He said London can do very well on Australian terms without a deal. The UK's National Audit Office has warned of a significant disruption when the Brexit transition period ends. The watchdog says it is very unlikely traders will be ready for checks in the EU is due to impose at its borders. It says the United Kingdom ports have limited time to test new IT systems. After years of delay, the first government-funded mosque in the Greek capital of Athens has opened its doors to worshippers. Athens has not had a formal mosque since the Ottomans left the region nearly 200 years ago. Thousands of Muslims from countries including Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh live in Athens. But until now, they had been forced to pray in makeshift mosques, in warehouses or basement apartment buildings. The Muslim community had been lobbying the government for decades, and it seems their prayers have finally been answered.
It's an historic moment for the Muslim communities living in Athens. We have been waiting this mosque for so long. Since the first law was passed in 2006, it took 14 years because there were so many bureaucratic barriers and some legal issues with the construction of the mosque.
The new building in Athens Vitanikos district will serve around 500,000 Muslims. Its construction had been riddled with controversy, including the change of locations due to protest by some locals. The construction finally began in 2017, and now after its completion, Muslims are breathing a sigh of relief.
The mosque for us Muslims is something very important, and I would like to thank Allah. I would like to thank the Republic of Greece, which helped us to complete this project.
Athens was the only European Union capital without an official mosque. Though some Muslims are unhappy with the mosque's appearance, as it lacks a dome or a minaret, others say it's a welcome start. In football, Southampton comfortably beat Newcastle United 2-0 in the Premier League fixture. With a fifth league win this season, Southampton have topped the table with 16 points for the first time since 1988. The hosts secured a lead in the 7th minute with Shea Adams volleying, and after good work from Kyle Walker-Peters and Walcott. Stuart Armstrong capitalized on the Saints' lead by dispatching a left-foot shot into the bottom left corner. Newcastle carelessly lost the possession of the ball in dangerous positions for both goals, contributing to their defeat. Newcastle are in the 11th spot with 11 points. And now it's time to take a look at the weather around the globe. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.